So, welcome back to Silmarillion Total War and to another battle replay, and today we have a scenario, and for once I've managed to catch it on the same version, well, I've managed to catch the replay on the same version that it was played on, because there was no error, we're not playing on a different version of the game files, so today we will be seeing the actually accurate battle that was played here in Silmarillion Total War, and it is a scenario which sees the Dominion of Tol In Gaurhoth fielding 3 armies to attack this very picturesque looking settlement, which is currently held by my personal favourite faction, has to be said, the Falathrim, or the Elves of the Falas as they're called. And they've actually had some improvements made to them over the last little while, because it used to be that they weren't really capable of dishing out the damage against a few factions, although to be fair I think they were actually set up quite well to deal with Tol In Gaurhoth before. It was more their lack of AP that was a bit of a problem, which has been addressed in this version. It'll be interesting to see if we see the new unit that they've been given that combats that problem. Something else you may also notice is that it's quite bright. The brightness looks a little bit over the top, perhaps. I think YouTube compression does actually reduce that effect a little bit, so it will probably look actually slightly better on YouTube, which is ironic considering the compression usually makes things a little bit worse. But there is actually a reason for that, and I know that at least one of the developers is around to watch this, so I've actually got a bug report here, and that is the fact that changing the brightness level has no impact at all. So you can't change the brightness level, so it's effectively stuck at 50%, even though I put it on 30 because that is the optimal level for the reshade settings that I use. And when it's up to 50, obviously you get things a little bit too bright like this, but it shouldn't be too much of a problem. It's not too off-putting, and ultimately it does give the feeling of a rather nice sunny day. So it's not the end of the world, but that is worth bearing in mind, the fact that the brightness adjustment does seem to be broken in the current build, which for most people they won't really notice that because they'll just keep it on 50 anyway, but it is worth mentioning. We'll go through the attacking armies first of all. The Dominion of Tol In Gaurhoth, 3 armies of which, obviously the, generally speaking, orcs, obviously, so big numbers, not so heavily armoured as their cousins from Angband, but they do have a few more aggressive options with regards to infantry. They have much more in terms of mounted options as well, albeit in a battle like this, mounted units, while they can still play a part, as we may very well see, it is worth bearing in mind that they're not going to play as big a role as they would in a significantly more open battle, albeit there is rather open plains around this settlement. So we have Captain Gervais, who does have one unit of one mounted unit. We have the Gijak Skaraz Zagula Klab, which is the heavier version of the standard wargs. They're not the bodyguard wargs that Tol In Gaurhoth get, but they are the heavier version of the standard lineup that they have. And obviously they're pretty good in sustained melee with other cavalry, which most of Tol In Gaurhoth's cavalry is going to be very good at doing that sort of thing. But the heavy armour obviously also makes them a little bit more resilient to arrow fire and the like, because obviously wargs, especially the lighter wargs like the Laugskaraz and the Hishtbukraz, do tend to be quite vulnerable to enemy arrow fire, whereas the Gijak Skaraz can withstand a little bit more damage in that regard. We have a personal favourite of mine, honestly, in the Tol In Gaurhoth roster, the Hishtbukraz Howlers, one of the lower end units that Tol In Gaurhoth have. They do actually have an even lower tier unit than this in the Hishtbukraz Warband, which are essentially the fodder of their lineup, sort of the low tier spears. But the Howlers, they are capable of dishing out a little bit more damage than them, of course, because they don't wield a spear. They have those 2 axes that they wield, so they're going to be able to kill something at least. They're not going to be able to overpower many units because of their lower stats. However, they have locked morale, which makes them pretty ideal, honestly, for throwing them into a hopeless situation and then bombarding the enemy with something like the Ash Priests, your artillery, any sort of ranged units, because you don't mind if you get friendly fire, and they aren't going to run away, even if the catastrophic effect on your morale that the Mangonel can have, which we'll get onto in just a moment, can affect other units. It will not affect your Howlers. Speaking of which, we have the mighty Hishtbukraz Ash Priest here. You can see the little horns. They have the ashen faces as well. Very, very scary unit. Probably, well, I say probably, there is a unit in Tol In Gaurhoth now which is certainly more scary than the Ash Priests, but they are relentless, so that means they cannot be staggered when they're in melee, so they can still take damage, of course, but they won't be stun locked, essentially. Even if they're completely surrounded, they'll still keep swinging their axe and continue to get a few more kills. Huge damage in huge armor piercing damage in melee as well because of those large axes, and of course they have their Nafatoon like projectiles as well. Very, very scary all around unit, the Ash Priests. And could be really, really useful against the defenders of the Falathrim today as they try and bunch themselves up and hold those chokes. The Ash Priest can be exactly the sort of thing which gets them out of the way. We have the Mangonel as well. Obviously, morale-wise, this can have a devastating effect on the enemy. It can also do a lot of damage, more so when the enemy is advancing towards you, I have to say, because they have to go through the fields of fire. Whereas if the enemy is sort of in a more static position, you have to hope that the Mangonel shower, as it is, manages to hit nicely. But shouldn't be too much of an issue because the Falathrim will be banking up on that hill that leads up to the settlement itself, I'm sure. So the Mangonel should have ample opportunity to get some good damage done. There are the Warband, obviously the low tier spears. They don't have the same locked morale or the ability to deal damage to infantry that the Howlers have, but they are very cheap and they do still have an anti-cavalry bonus, so there is still a purpose to bringing them. In behind them, we can see a lineup of the Gijek Skaraz, chosen probably the most defensive unit in the Tol In Gaurhoth infantry force because they are a heavy spearmen. Certainly by Tol In Gaurhoth standards, they have heavy armour, a big shield value, and obviously spears in general are good at keeping themselves alive, better than most other units, even if they don't do as much damage. But yeah, they should be able to sort of withstand a bit of damage from the Falathrim, more so than a lot of the other Tol In Gaurhoth units. Speaking of which, we have some Scarahai Blood Drinkers. Pretty, they look like a sort of lower to mid-tier Orc Axeman, and that is technically what they are, but their charge is very, very nasty, to be honest with you. If you let them get a clean charge off, they can do a lot of damage to even a higher tier unit. Obviously in sustained melee, they're armor piercing as well, but they do lack a little bit in terms of the melee defense values, as you would expect from a heavy axeman with more limited armor values like the Scarahai Blood Drinkers have. So very much a glass cannon, but if they are used correctly, they can punch surprisingly high above their weight class. And in behind, Scarahai Long Fangs as well, so you can see that they have some hand-thrown projectiles on their back, which I believe are throwing axes. But yeah, they are effectively the lower-end line infantry unit of Tol In Gaurhoth as well, so they are a bit of a multifaceted thing. But don't expect them to win too many contests in melee. They're here for their numbers and their utility more than anything else. But there are a lot of them to hack their way through, and that does mean, of course, there is a lot of missiles as well. I think if we have a look over here, the Scarahai Trappers, I think, are the Javelin variant, which I think they're the AP version. One of them is armor piercing, one of them is not, and I think the Trappers are the version which is AP because they're much more focused around their projectiles and they're not really as useful in melee as the Long Fangs. At least I think that's the way round it is. Yeah. The intricacies of AP and non-AP javelins in this mod will take a little bit of a while to get used to. We have got Tundra's Fox, who is also playing as Tol In Gaurhoth. We've got some Hishbut Graz Warband on the front. I can see three very menacing figures in the background there, which is a little bit strange, but we'll get onto him in just a moment. Scarahai Longfangs as well. So obviously, once again, we're going to see some of those hand-thrown projectiles, as we will from the Trappers. Blood Drinkers, once again, nice damage. He's actually got the Wolf Guard instead, so they've got those big maces, of course. AP, very useful potentially. Maybe less so against the Falathrim, like that. Of all the Elven factions, they're not the most heavily armoured. They're not the least either, to be fair. There are a few targets within the roster, such as the Aran Kielim and the Balar units, which the AP will be very useful against. But in those cases, even then, I don't think the Wolf Guard would be victorious in a 1v1. They'll have to rely on some support as well, because that is some of the Falathrim's most intimidating units. But the Wolf Guard is still a very cost-effective unit in that regard. We've got another Mangonel, of course. We've got more Ash Priests. We have got some Gijak Skaras chosen. And over here, we have got Sauron. Not only in stereo, but I don't know what the three-way version of that is, but we have three Saurons. So I suppose he's sort of got some foul sorcery going on, a little bit of a mirror image. But, of course, incredibly dangerous unit, Sauron. I mean, anti-elephant units are good against him. So what you want is, ideally, unit with anti-armor and anti-elephant bonuses attached to it, and Sauron will be whittled down. He's very expensive after all, so it is worth bearing that in mind. And the Falathrim are not short on anti-elephant units, because that is his class of unit in the game. It allows him to have an area of effect attack. If you allow him to get into a blob of infantry that is not so good at dealing damage to him back, though, he will rack up an incredible kill count, really. So you need to be really, really careful of him. Goes without saying, really, doesn't it? The closest thing that any of these Medieval 2 submods have to a hero unit, I think, in addition to the old Balrog from Vanilla 3rd Age. And then we have Demetrios. He's got some Hishbut Kraz Warband on the front once again. He's got some Howlers. He's got some Gijak Skaras on the flank as well. So just some standard wargs, just to allow them to have some sort of mobility. More Scarahai Trappers. More Scarahai Blood Drinkers. Lots of Scarahai in the first lines. And then the Gijak Skaras will come in later. He's got a mix of Chosen and Wolf Guard, actually. And then at the back, his General's Bodyguard is once again the Ash Priest. So 3 units of Ash Priests, Sauron, lots of scary stuff for the Falathrim to have to deal with. Fortunately, however, I do believe that they are going to be equal to the task in many ways. Foresters of Brithombar are a multiple-handed, they are technically, but 2-handed spear unit. Very good at hiding on flanks to catch cavalry out. That's not going to be the case here, of course, because it's going to be very obvious where the Falathrim are. So in this case, I think they're really just going to be supporting units. They could also be good if the Gijak Scarabs try to force their way through. A nice reserve unit for Eclipse to use, I would say. The heart and soul of this defence, however, is most certainly going to be the Nobles of Valar. Once again, they are a spear wall unit, but they don't have the range of pikes. They're effectively just a 2-handed spear. Very heavily armoured though, so they're not so weak to arrows. And it is worth saying as well that there wasn't any archers, I don't think, from the Dominion of Tol In Gaurhoth today. It was only javelins and the like, so they're going to have to be really aggressive, but in many ways it makes their strategy even clearer. I think most players' problem is the fact that they feel like they don't need to be aggressive, so when they're forced to be, it can actually help them more than hinder them. We'll see how well the Falathrim deal with this assault. But the Nobles of Valar, brilliant unit for holding the line. Obviously phalanx units are the best at doing that sort of thing, and it must be said that, you know, the pikes of the game are still going to be better because of the increased range. But the Nobles of Valar are so important for the Falathrim when they have to be defensive, and that's going to be a massive import here. He's also got the Arain Ethadun, which are the heaviest unit of infantry that the Falathrim have, a really heavily armoured and very tanky spear bodyguard. So obviously they're going to be really, really good at holding the line as well, which is going to be pretty much everything to the Falathrim on this occasion. Their heavier archer as well as the marksman of Balar, albeit their heavy armour is only really going to be useful when they run out of ammo and they have to charge into melee, to be honest with you, and given the amount of AP that Tol In Gaurhoth have, it may not actually be the benefit to them that it would otherwise be, because in a skirmish fight, of course, they're really very, very good, but they don't have the unique projectiles of, for example, Nargothrond, the House of Falathrim, or what was the other one again? It wasn't Fingolfin, but there was another faction who had their heavy archer be like, it was like split shots and Silverthorn arrows, which those 2 heavy archers get, which is a bit of a leg up, to be honest with you. It's something that Feanor don't get, it's something the Falathrim don't get, but there is rhyme and reason, I suppose, but still very, very good in a skirmish fight nonetheless. Seafarers of Brithombar, this is the unit which has been added to the Falathrim to make them a little bit more competitive when it comes to dealing with armoured units. You can see that they are a sort of light to medium infantry that wields a mace, so they have AP now interspersed throughout their main line, which is really going to be very, very useful for them. It's more important when they're dealing with factions like Angband or Finarfin or Feanor, of course, where previously they couldn't really do damage to them quickly enough. A unit like this allows them to do so, and it's not overly expensive either. You can have several of them throughout your roster, which is very nice. More foresters. Several units of the Mariners of Arendil, which they are an anti-elephant unit, so they will be the sort of thing which will be quite good against Sauron. You only normally see one of them because they are a legendary company after all, so it's prohibitively expensive to bring more than one under normal circumstances, but on this occasion, because it's a scenario, Eclipse has decided to give himself 3 of this unique unit of elves. Not so unique on this occasion, we can just say it's one big unit, I suppose. We have the Marines of Eglarest, which are a heavier javelin unit. There is sort of a line infantry javelin hybrid and a spear javelin hybrid. This is the line infantry version, so they should be better at dealing damage to infantry, which is going to be more important on this occasion, I think. And over on this side of things, he's also got some rangers of Brithombar, so some light archers, which of course should be really useful when they funnel in through here, and a unit of what might be my favourite looking unit in the game up to this point, the Aran Kielim. Very, very strong unit of sword and board line infantry, upper tier. And then the final army on the field today, we have the Yoda Guy 12, who has got 3 units of the Aran Kielim, so a lot of heavy metal. He's got the Orion Ethadun as well, a couple of units of the Marksman of Balar. He's got some Spear Host of Brithombar, which are pretty much the entry-level Falathrim unit, to be honest with you. Sort of a light to medium spear infantry unit, which is not overly expensive by Elven standards. But in terms of how heavy duty they are, they may struggle against the numbers of Tol In Gaurhoth today. The 2-handed version, the Foresters of Brithombar, which can hide once again. Nobles of Balar, Marines of Eglarest here in numbers again, so lots of Javelins. Warriors of Eglarest, which are the fully infantry-focused version. Effectively the understudy to the Mariners of Arendil, which we saw earlier. A couple of units of Seafarers once again, which will be useful against the Gijak Scarabs when they move forward. And a couple of units of the Nobles of Balar. So, without further ado, let's begin. There is a time limit on this battle as well, so another thing which will encourage the forces of Tol In Gaurhoth that they can't afford to hang around. They need to charge in. And to be fair, they have enough infantry at their disposal here to the point where they won't care too much if they take much in the way of losses. Because the fact that they don't have any archers at all really removes all doubt in their mind. Like I said, they can't skirmish with the enemy. If they stay at range for too long, units like the Marksmen of Balar and the Rangers of Brithombar will rip through, especially the more lightly armoured Scarahai and Hishbukraz that Tol and Gaurhoth are trafficking in here. But if they get up close and personal, you would have to say that their muscle should probably be enough to see them overcome the Falathrim. Especially if they pick their targets correctly. There is a catapult here which could be really deadly as well. But the Nobles of Balar will of course be public enemy number 1, Javelins and Ash Priest firebombs. Will probably be focusing on a unit like this. They're actually pulling back from the first line as well, so they're going to be interesting to see where exactly they set up. I think you could actually go right the way around and go up along the shoreline over here, but it would take them a long time to do so. Tol In Gaurhoth. Captain Gervais is just sort of waiting for his allies to move in first. They are going to move backwards. I mean, trying to hold a narrower part of the map would probably be advisable, and also they can put their archers up on either side. There are no rangers on display today, of course, because Silmarillion only has the one body-piercing archer, the Randirim and Tol Galen from the Elves of Assyriand, which is a massive boost to them in a situation like this, but of course no one else can rely on such things, so if the Falathrim are going to win this based on their ranged units, they're going to have to position their archers very nicely. Marksmen of Balar have got a decent amount of ammunition anyway, and so too have the Rangers, so as long as they position themselves correctly, especially considering the more lightweight nature of Tol In Gaurhoth in comparison to their cousins from Angband, they should still be fine. You can see the red line actually does block off the back section of the map. There is this gate here, and then they can also make a final stand if they so choose around this Elven Tower. But, I mean, they can still go through a lot of these gaps, I think, and yeah, you can just go around this sort of gatehouse over here. So I think I would recommend the first defence should probably be here, and then the second defence there, and then maybe don't split up your forces any more than you need to. But yes, the Falathrim. Armour-wise, they may not be quite on the same sort of level as Feanor or Finarfin, but they certainly don't do too badly in that regard. They have a few really heavily armoured units at their high end, but their main body of their units is sort of more medium infantry than anything else. But I think actually probably a good comparison would be against Finarfin, to be honest with you, because Finarfin are another faction which relies heavily on spears and polearms and the like, which to be fair, the Falathrim have got a lot of them as well. But where Finarfin are almost entirely defensive, I would say. Even if they're being super aggressive, really, they're going to win their fights by wearing the enemy down more than anything else. You can see the orcs scurrying through and over this elven architecture, which looks pretty cool, actually. But I do think the Falathrim have got a few more options when it comes to being a little bit more aggressive. They definitely have more in the way of javelins. Sauron is moving forward pretty quickly. I mean, I would probably wait with him a little bit, because if he comes forward immediately, something like the Mariners of Erendil can jump on him, and that anti-elephant damage will add up. Armour piercing can also be useful, but to be honest with you, I think the Macemen of the Falathrim are maybe a little bit too lightweight even for dealing with Sauron. The Marksmen of Balar getting into position on the cliff's edge. They're getting right on the edge as well, so Eclipse clearly eager to make sure that most, if not all of his ammunition manages to clear the edge of the cliff. The Yoda guy over here, meanwhile, is a name I haven't seen quite so much, and his positioning is maybe going to result in much more wasted ammunition, which you would hope not for the Falathrim's sake. Yeah, this I would imagine almost all of them are probably going to be buried into the dirt. Yeah, a lot of them are, unfortunately. Javelins, though, being utilised on the front line. The Marines of Eglarest for Eclipse throwing in here. So they're just going to hold the line. They're going to use as much of their javelins as they can. Scarahai Longfangs. So you can see there could be projectiles coming forward from Tol In Gaurhoth as well, but a lot of damage already being done. I mean, the Scarahai Longfangs and the Hishbukraz Warband are not the most important units, but to be fair, in a situation like this, if you're getting this many kills with your javelins, it's probably worth your while, to be honest with you, to kill them off. Hishbukraz Warband, yeah, they're definitely going after the Scarahai Longfangs here. They do have a shield, but it's not the best shield, and the armour is also not quite on a level, and you can see the Falathrim archers and javelins reaping a heavy toll there on the Scarahai Longfangs as they move forward. Yeah, these archers need to move closer to the cliff edge, but again, like I said, a name that I haven't actually heard before, or at least not one that I've shown in a replay before, so perhaps the experience level in Medieval 2 is not quite as high, but these things come in time. Marines of Eglarest reloading again. Would it be worth putting a dent in the warband? Possibly not. I mean, they are a hybrid unit, so even if... I mean, to be fair, you might not have the ability to use these javelins as you get engaged in melee, so it might be better to just use them on the warbands, make sure they're done with, rather than holding on to them for a moment that may never come. And putting more dents in there. You can see a few of these arrows are coming in. Thrown axes being utilised, going after the Foresters of Brythonbar, because of course they are unshielded, so those throwing axes will do pretty well against a unit like the Foresters. Actually, the Javelins charging forward, perhaps hoping that they can break this little initial thing. Actually, no, the Marines of Eglarest are spears now. That's interesting. I thought they were wearing swords on their side. They were swordsmen in melee at one point, but I guess they've been changed to spears. Very nice anti-cavalry tool, if nothing else. I mean, even though they're spears and will be subject to the spear malus. Oh no, they do have some Hishbuk-Raz hunters, so they do have some archers after all. They were just hidden. And I think this is the armour upgrade for them as well, is it not? Or is this just their regular unit model? Well, regardless, they're still a very light archer, to be fair, so if it comes down to a skirmish between them and the Falathrim archers, the Falathrim will win, of course, but there's some good targets for them to go after here. If they go after the Foresters have no shield, they have little in the way of armour as well, so they're going to fall if those Hishbuk-Raz manage to land their blows. Another nice volley coming in from the catapult there, hitting centre mass of the Hishbuk-Raz as the Foresters of Brythonbar continue to move forward. There are quite a lot of dead Falathrim now though, so to be fair, despite some early savage blows inflicted upon them, Tol In Gaurhoth have now got the assault fully underway. Scarahai Blood Drinkers, the AP is not going to be terribly useful against the Brythonbar units. Like I said, at best you can consider them medium. I'd say Brythonbar are actually light and the Eglarest are more the medium tier of armour for the Falathrim, so the AP probably not going to be all that useful. Also, they are an ideal target for the Falathrim archers. Definitely worthwhile to go after because you'll kill them pretty easily, and if you don't, they do have the potential to do a good bit of damage as the dense shield wall formation of the Hishbuk-Raz continues to do its thing. Those Foresters back there are getting teed off on by the Hishbuk-Raz hunters, but yeah, the warband, without any sort of support on the front line, this was always going to happen really, as the Falathrim squash them underfoot, but they're going to try and do a general retreat here. I think the Falathrim try and draw them into more of their support. There's some spear host of Brythonbar back there as a sort of reinforcement column. Again, the lighter spears that the Falathrim have at their disposal. They've pulled back and they have actually strung Tol In Gaurhoth out a little bit here. Those Hishbuk-Raz are fighting to the death, but more of the Blood Drinkers are on their way in. As we head up over here, it'll be interesting to see what the marksmen of Balar are going after. Ooh, they've changed it to regular shot now for the catapult, as they are very eager to kill off that mangonel back there, and it's definitely a good idea to do so, I think, because the mangonel could make this road here a bit of a killing field if they aren't careful. I think the marksmen of Ballard just ran out of ammunition actually, so that's not a lot of ammo, but they pulled out their large elven curved blades now, which of course elven heavy archers in particular tend to be able to hold their own very nicely in melee as well. But it is a race against time here for Tol In Gaurhoth. It is a timed battle after all, so they need to keep up the assault. Even if it seems reckless, they need to keep moving. Hishbuk-Raz Howlers are moving in. One of the problems for the Falathrim is going to be dealing with the Howlers, to be honest, because again, you cannot break them in the way that the Warband were. Like, they're going to be here until they're all killed now. As the Marines of Eglarest get themselves into position, another volley of the Javelins there, hitting the Scarahai Longfangs as they continue to move forwards. Very depleted now, of course, but setting up another line. You can see, however, where the colour discrepancy between Tol In Gaurhoth and the Falathrim is very clear to see, of course. Oof. One of the mangonels does fall. And this is the mangonel of Captain Gervais. He still has one of his mangonels. I mean, if he's going to use it, it should be now, because clearly that catapult isn't going to deviate from its course. And they are going to fire it now. The catapult will probably get its volley off first, so this is going to be very interesting to see if it hits. And it does. Unfortunate for Captain Gervais there, but they do have more, I believe. More siege engines back here, or do they? I'm sure they do. don't they? Perhaps not. I could have sworn that there was another one as well. If not, that's... Oh no, there it is. Tundra's Fox has got one as well. I was going to say, if they had only the one and they used it that recklessly, it's a bit of a... It's a mighty waste, to be honest with you. It'd be interesting to see what Tundra's Fox is going after. You can't really hit his so easily, but the same is also true, to be honest with you, of him. He's gotten a little bit fortunate there, I think, in the way that that fire has landed, but it's not the easiest shot for the Mangonel to make either because of the position of the cliff. I think in order to get a really nice shot onto the Falathrim up here, you need to expose yourself to a certain extent. So that's going to be it's going to be risky, of course, but you can see some more Warband have moved forward with numbers. Obviously the Howlers are in there as well, but there's also Gijak Skaraz chosen to make sure that the line continues to fight for a long time. Obviously much tougher to kill than the Scarahai and the Hishtbuk-Raz, much more lightly armoured. In come the Marksmen of Balar, adding to the front line. As you can see, the Falathrim on the front are starting to struggle. The Seafarers of Brithombar are here as well, so a bit of AP, maybe a little bit too eager to commit the AP, considering the fact that the heavily armoured units are still not really committed yet. It's more of the lightly armoured stuff that these maces are having to deal with, and obviously the lower base attack that armour-piercing infantry has means they're not going to be too efficient against them. Foresters of Brithombar coming down, they're obviously going to get, you can see there, a massive amount of damage dealt to them on the approach because of how weak they are to arrow fire. Even a very basic unit of archers like the Hishtbuk-Raz Hunters going to be capable of doing some good damage there. The Orc Mangonel sort of revealing itself a little bit more so now. Ironically, one of the more heavily armoured units for Tol In Gaurhoth because of their links to Angband. What on earth's going on there? Well, there comes the fire as it falls. You can see there actually a large sort of spread of the fire there as they shot their ammunition right up into the sky. So the Falathrim do need to be quite careful here. The Warriors of Eglares getting ready to move in, the medium line infantry. You can see the Balar units are in there, and honestly probably one of the stronger melee units for dealing with a lot of the trash that they're faced with now. The quality is starting to ring through because the Gijak Skaraz weren't engaged directly. That might be the end of the ammunition though from the Mangonel. Actually no, that's just Captain Gervais's crew. Here comes another shot from the Mangonel. Where is it going to land? Oh, that's a very nice shot actually, managing to kill off several of the Warriors of Eglarest. A direct hit there as well, really brutal actually. And as they try to escape it, the fires will consume more of these medium infantrymen. They also got some collateral on the spear host of Brithombar, so very, very nice from Tundra's Fox. I think probably the Falathrim are just going to try and weather this storm and take it as it comes. Scarahai trappers moving forward, so I mean certainly the pressure is on. I like the way that Tol In Gaurhoth have approached this battle so far. They're keeping up the pressure, and it's resource management at this point, and I think, you know, there's still some Marksmen of Balar over here, depending on how much of their ammunition is actually hitting its mark. That's actually pretty good. They're not hitting too much of their arrows into the dirt in front of them now. They're trying to shoot the Mangonel crew. They'll get some damage to the Gijak Skaraz as well. More Hishtbuk-Raz moving forward. More Gijak Skaraz as well. But the Falathrim, they are doing quite well on the front line. They were, you know, victory was looking good for them earlier. Now though, with the arrival of a lot more Gijak Skaraz, more in the way of numbers as well, more javelins coming forward, that Yoda guy is trying to get his Nobles of Balar onto the front line, who will help an awful lot, but they are going to immediately come under a huge amount of fire from those javelins. He needs to keep them moving. He's trying to form them up into spear wall from loose, but it's taking far too long. They need to get closer than this because they're getting ripped apart. That's quite poor, I have to say, from the Yoda guy. And that is such an important pillar of their defence. They cannot afford to be wasted in such a fashion. Some Seafarers of Brithombar are moving forward. I think, honestly, with how this has gone so far, there's a very real case for saying they should just say that this is a bust now and move backwards. And, you know, they should try and maybe go back to the final stand already, because they can salvage this, but what they might lose in attempting to salvage it might be too much, to be honest with you. This Mangonel is continuing to just do its thing. More fire, more damage to the Nobles of Balar, devastating damage in fact. Oh, that's grisly, absolutely grisly from the Mangonel. And what started off so well as well, like the Catapult was doing a really good job at focusing down the other Mangonel. They've allowed this Mangonel to bully them though from Tundra's Fox, and they may carry with that their destruction. Just look at this as they flee for the hills, the Falathrim. as they realise the situation on the front line. As long as that mangonel remains in business, it's hopeless. So the brave fighters from Brythombar do rout. And this is the moment that Tol In Gaurhoth can really take a hold of this battle and not allow the Falathrim back into it, to be honest with you. If they commit forward enough resources to swamp over this front line, I think the Falathrim at this point in the battle have panicked, to be honest with you, and I think that I don't know if they're going to be able to recover from that, to be honest with you. More shots from further back. Javelins from the Marines of Eglarest. I don't know how much ammunition they have in their archers left either. I mean, they've got some ranges of Brythombar up there, but at this point, you have to say it's more of a melee slog, if anything. I mean, to be fair, I'd say actually, if anything, Tol In Gaurhoth have probably got more ammunition left, which is probably a sign that those marksmen of Balar up on that cliff, wasting them in such a fashion, wasting too much ammunition by putting them into the dirt, may very well prove to be far more costly than it initially looked like it was going to be. Mariners of Arendil being targeted by the Scarahai trappers, and this is what I was saying. The fact that the attackers have been coerced into being aggressive, I think, has actually helped them on this occasion. Even players that have played the game a long time often fall into the trap of trying to take it too slowly as the attackers, but the time limit here has allowed them to put away those inhibitions and just charge forward and try and be as aggressive as possible. And so far, you have to say it's worked out very nicely for Tol In Gaurhoth. As the Gijak Scaraz are on the front line, the marksmen of Balar will do a decent job on the front line, but I mean, they're on their own, really. Ooh, hello, I heard something. Again, that mangonel shooting point blank, actually getting some friendly fire there into the Scarahai trappers. I wonder where Sauron is. There he is. You can see all three of him, which is a bit bizarre, but there he is. And he is fighting hard. And there you can see the area of effect damage. He's managing to hit people in a wide arc all around him, and he is cleaving his way through some of these Marines of Eglarest. The Nobles of Balar won't do too well against him either. In fact, Sauron might be ideal for breaking up a phalanx such as that. There is also the other two of him back down here, but it looks as though he's going to retreat. And that's because the Marines of Eglarest were on the way, who are one of the better tools the Falathrim have for trying to deal with him. Just in general, though, on the front line, they buff morale. They're just a really solid line infantry unit as well, very capable of dishing out the damage. They need that support on the front line at this point, because they've lost too much ground. They've been a little bit too wasteful already, the Falathrim. They need to start turning this battle around. Now, they do have a lot of these Nobles of Balar that they can commit to the front line. And you have to say Javelins and Ash Priests are probably the best way to deal with that, in addition to Sauron himself, of course, who is now coming back for another bite of the cherry as he charges in, carving through some of these marksmen and Marines of Eglarest, who of course are spears, and then he's going to leave once again, trying to make it so that, and again, more Javelins coming to the Nobles of Balar. They're definitely targeting down the right sort of things here, Tol In Gaurhoth. If the Falathrim are going to win this, it will need to be through skill at arms in melee, in the pure sense of the word, because I think so far in terms of planning and execution, Tol In Gaurhoth have had the better of this battle so far. Seafarers of Brythombar back there, so they still have some of that. One of the catapults does go down. The catapult, I think, is being saved, I think, so that it can be used on the enemy infantry. Thing is, they may not have the luxury of doing that anymore. I think the crew has been run away somewhere. But the crew has been sent off, but they can still go after the catapult, I think, by targeting the Orion Ephedune, who again are in just full view of javelins and mangonels. I'm a little bit less forgiving of mismanagement of units when it's just one choke point that you're having to look after. If it's a large field battle and there's a lot going on, you can understand it, but where there's only one thing you've got to focus on, when people start making a bit of a meal of things, it's a little bit less understandable. Having said that, now that a lot of these Nobles of Balar are on the front line, fighting alongside their marksman brethren, they are starting to do a ton of damage to the Scarahai that are trying to hold things down from the front. More arrows coming in. Ooh. Where are those archers? What archers are they? So they have brought forward the Rangers of Brythombar. They're in a decent position as well. They'll be able to do some good damage. Certainly some of the more lightly armoured units. The Mariners are also doing a big help on the front line because of how strong they are. Again, definitely an upper tier line infantry. I think they're just shy of 1,000 florins to bring. Definitely worth it for the Falathrim though. given their strengths. More reinforcements being sent to this side for Tol In Gaurhoth. Some Scarahai blood drinkers. They could try and work up the line, I suppose, but the Yoda guy can easily commit another unit of Nobles of Balar, which I think he should probably do at this point, to be honest with you. You don't want to be giving up any more ground, and you've got some forward momentum actually over here. This little spearhead here for Tol In Gaurhoth is mainly because this is where the Gijak Skaraz are, so they're less likely to give ground. They're actually going to, instead, Eclipse is going to send his Orion Ephedune over here to plug the gap. AP would probably be quite good actually against them, but in terms of sheer quality, the discrepancy between Scarahai and the bodyguard unit for the Falathrim is going to be too great, as Sauron vacates the premises once again. The Mangonel could try and fire point blank. Again, you want to be a little bit careful using the fiery ammunition here, because if you hit your own men, considering the fact that the Falathrim are now at this point gaining ground on you, it could be enough to rout some of your men. There's a lot more Scarahai on the way forward though. As you hear the Seafarers, where the Seafarers are, they've got a lot of forward momentum going on. The Gijak Skaraz are not going to enjoy going up against them at all, and actually the crew now, in order to get the Mangonel out of there, they've had to turn around, and that's a bit of a misplay. To be fair, I think Tundra has already got some good value out of his Mangonel, so it's not the end of the world, but he pushed his Mangonel too close to the enemy line, to the point where trying to retreat it meant that when they tilted it around, the Mangonel crew ended up in the middle of the Falathrim line. So not great for them. The Mangonel is probably lost at this point, with the Seafarers of Brythonbar continuing to push forward. You can see here, fighting hard on the front line were the Gijak Skaraz, but they have now broken, so the momentum has shifted in this fight. The Falathrim, when it comes to just grinding it out in melee on the front line, they've definitely got more going for them in that regard than Tol In Gaurhoth, who are arguably the worst at doing that. I think you could also put Assyrian into that equation, because they're also very lightly armoured, they're not the most heavy duty, and also numbers are an issue for them, whereas Tol In Gaurhoth at least can just continue to throw people into the meat grinder and it won't be too costly for them. But even so, that against the Falathrim it's not going great for them on the front line, but again, supporting units like this, Scarahai Longfangs, those axe throwers doing their thing, and they will do pretty well against the unshielded marksmen, even with their heavy armour. The Orion Ephedune though, with massive shields, multiple HP, blood drinkers on the way forward, more and more units just being committed. A brutal fight to be sure, but we are now at the halfway point of the time limit. Based on the frames alone though, I think we can safely say that this won't be decided by a timeout, which speaks well of Tol In Gaurhoth. It means that they're not going to allow it to come to that. If they can break this line though, if they can flood forwards, that would be a real game decider. Rangers of Brythonbar shooting over to the other side, going after stuff like blood drinkers and Longfangs. Not the most dangerous units Tol In Gaurhoth have, but very vulnerable. Is that the catapult? Nope. What was that then? Was that another artillery piece from somewhere? Yoran Kialim are yet to be committed as well. Late on, they could be a real threat. Here come the Gijak Skaraz Wolfguard. It's interesting that they're over on this side of things. More medium infantry over here than anything. And you really do want to have some Wolfguard left later on when you're fighting off against the Aran Kialim, because it's definitely your best infantry unit for fighting something like that. But they've managed to get up and around the flank here, and now these maces should be able to find their marks. Reinforcements are needed. Even if it's just those marksmen of Balar to plug the gap, which I think is going to be the case. As they charge downhill, elven curved blades at the ready. If the Wolfguard gets some support here, honestly, this is a pretty good idea, and they're getting support in the best form, really. Sauron himself comes forward. The Mangonels, at this point, broken. What is that? Is there another Mangonel? Well, I mean, Sauron's over here, so you want to be a little bit careful. You could end up grilling him. Sauron really going deep into this line at this point, which is risky. There are mariners in there. Risky indeed. Is it a catapult, perhaps? No, that was... Oh, it could be the Ash Priest. That's right, yes. Fiery projectiles are a sign that the Ash Priests are forward, and indeed they are. Demetrios has moved forward with them. Where has Sauron gotten to? He's big, but you can still lose track of him in large battles such as this. There he goes. All three of them. Silmarillion getting ready to move into position, and more nobles of Balar. You can also see some Scarahai bloodtrinkers very depleted at this point. A lot of the Scarahai are, and I don't think these Wolfguard are going to be able to hold on for too much longer. There's simply too many marksmen of Balar. I mean, the AP is going to be useful against them as well, to be honest with you, but numbers-wise, they just need more around them to support. More Wolfguard, perhaps, but you want to save some of them for the Kiolim. Maybe just get some trappers in there. The Ash Priests are here, and they're getting immediately focused down. A good target. I think they have 3 hit points, which is a sign of how tough they are, but they're not the most heavily armoured, and with their backs turned, not even their little wooden shield is going to be coming into effect, and you don't really want to be letting them do whatever they want in melee, because that's where they're at their most dangerous. Ploughing through the Seafarers of Bithombar now, though, is Sauron. The AP will be useful against him, but he's just so strong. You really just need to swamp him with units that have got bonuses against him in all aspects. And it's easier said than done when you're having to maintain a whole line. He's now in behind enemy lines as well. Warriors of Eglarest are coming in. Rangers of Bithombar are not really what you need in melee against Sauron, as he continues to make a nuisance of himself back here with his massive mace. The Iran Kiolim won't be the best thing against him either, because they don't have AP, nor do they have an anti-elephant bonus. I think the Orion Ephedune have got an anti-elephant bonus though, so in spite of their spear malice, they might not be the worst thing to send against him. Albeit you'd be risking the life of the lives of some of your most high-tier units. On the front line, meanwhile, things mixed fortunes. Sauron punched a hole in that side for Tol In Gaurhoth to maybe take advantage of. Over here, though, where the Gijak Scaraz overlapped, the marksmen of Balar have salvaged things, whereas in the middle it's more of an even fight, you'd have to say. The support from the Ash Priest initially, as well as some of these javelins, has turned the fight more even than it was, because of course with this many nobles of Balar on the front line, regular infantry like the Scarahai are going to struggle mightily. Sauron, meanwhile, continuing to do his thing, as you would expect of the big man. Warriors of Eglarest moving in, they're depleted. I think they're just trying to bog Sauron down, but that is very hard to do. He's got massive mass, of course, being an elephant. It's like trying to bog down a Mumakil. It can technically be done. You can slow him down at least, but you can't really stop him completely. Which, he does have the potential, I think, to be one of those units which is just super annoying, where he just starts running over your line and you can't really do much to stop him. There is a delicate balance to be had there, but he is also so expensive that misusing him will also likely be to your detriment. The Ash Priests are firing their flaming sorceries, and they're doing a lot of damage here on the front line to the Balar units. You can see they did actually try to follow Sauron in here with a lot of units, but the Falathrim are still somewhat in the way, but with another unit of Scarahai Longfangs, Hishtbukraz Howlers over here, I don't know if the Falathrim are going to be able to hold on to that without reinforcements. They still have all of that heavy line infantry, of course. Will they be committed? I mean, it's getting to the sharp end of this fight. The Gijak Scaraz are also a worry, you would say, for the Falathrim, because if they start running over the lines and start causing havoc back here as well as Sauron, that could be a real disaster for the Falathrim. Albeit they have enough spears in their roster, I think, to not be too concerned. They're going to try and push through the middle now. Tundra's Fox with his Gijak Scaraz chosen. Again, I think it's the right move to make. I think if you pressure the Falathrim from multiple angles at this point, that's where you could have the most. That's where you could have the most joy. In come the nobles of Balar, again in numbers. Things over here are looking a little bit more ropey now that the Scarahai trappers were committed. Again, it's a question of numbers. Mariners of Erendil are still back there. Some Rangers of Bithombar still have a bit of ammunition, and they're shooting over to the other side where a lot of the lightly armoured troops are. Although they just ran out of ammunition there, so that's the last volley they had. Sauron continuing to cause massive trouble in the back lines, you have to say. Orion Ephedune moving in, as well as the Warriors of Eglarest. I mean, this is pretty much the last throw of the dice that the Falathrim have. They have 1 unit of Mariners, a couple of units of Rangers, obviously not the best in melee, but also 3 units of Iran Kiolim. Whether that's going to be enough, I'm not so sure. If they can stop Sauron from just rolling over their back lines as he is doing at the moment, maybe, because with the support of the nobles of Balar anchoring the line, it could be a real concern. In come the Orion Ephedune. Obviously the Howlers will stand and fight to the bitter end as well, which is definitely going to be a problem. Those Rangers might still have a bit of ammo, which will help. It's going to be tough for the Falathrim at this point though. Maybe they could try and play for the time limit, but I don't know if that's going to be possible. It'll be close. Are they retreating? I think retreating's a bit of a waste of time at this point, to be honest with you. I think you've committed too much to the front line to just abandon it. If you were going to retreat back up there, I think you should have done it earlier in the battle when the front line started to go a little bit wonky. I think if you were going to do that now, I think it's already too late for that, to be honest. See, actually, the middle of the Tol In Gaurhoth line has actually crumbled, and the Aran Kialim charge in behind to the back line. That's not really terribly advisable, because only a few of them have made it, and they're into the welcoming arms of the Gijak Skaraz Wolfguard. That AP, especially with the overwhelming numbers they have back here now, all too happy to see the arrival of some heavily armoured units that they can crack like an egg. Sauron, meanwhile, is in here, and he is going to carve through these Rangers of Britholbar. Oof. In come the Aran Kialim. You could try and bog Sauron down, but I'm not sure it's going to be too successful. Arain Ephadun. A lot of these units are shaken. Maybe routing could be the key here, as these Eglarest units and the Falathrim bodyguard push back, continue to push back as well against some of the Scarahai and Gijak Skaraz over on this flank. They've technically got them surrounded. In fact, they've got some nice little crescent-shaped engagements across the field, to be honest, the Falathrim. And this might be what I was terming their last roll of the dice, to try and be aggressive, take the fight to them, try and make the shape of the engagement better for them. Unfortunately though, I think there is still these Ash Priests over here which still have some ammo. And there are probably Ash Priests in melee in the middle as well, indeed there are, which really, really tough to see how the Falathrim kill them with the infantry they have left at their disposal. Maybe the Balar nobles can do it with their phalanx, but stuff like the Aran Kialim, which they've saved to the late game, which is understandable given their ability to hold, not going to be good against the Ash Priest. They don't really have bonuses against Sauron. Tol In Gaurhoth also saved most of their Gijak Skaraz Wolfguard to the end as well, which means their AP is added to the mix. And so, while I do really, really like the Aran Kialim, they're not really suited for the situation at hand, and that might be what ultimately does the Falathrim in before, presumably, reinforcements arrive, which is what the time limit, I guess, is meant to signify. The Falathrim, I believe, did lose their first engagement, or their first battle within the Silmarillion, although I think that was to Angband when Círdan sallied out to meet them and ultimately was beaten back. Yeah, these Ash Priests, they were doing some good damage to the front line. I mean, to be fair, the Falathrim front line looks a lot more solid now. They still have those Mariners, which does mean they have that anti-elephant bonus to try and chase Sauron off, but Tundra's Fox has done exactly the right thing with a unit like this that you have to do. He's kept Sauron moving. There goes one of the generals. Killed by a heavy, rusted orc mace. Scarahai Longfangs are waiting. There's also some Gijak Skaraz chosen, which they may not be as dangerous damage-wise as their as the chosen, but they are still going to put up a fight on the front line and mean that Tol In Gaurhoth don't really fall apart, which would be the Falathrim's only hope, I think. It will end up being quite close though, considering the huge numbers discrepancy there was at the start of the fight. I mean, Tol In Gaurhoth have been made to bleed for this, and to be fair, they have been forced back down the hill to a certain extent by the Falathrim. But you can see now, this is what I was kind of afraid of. The Gijak Skaraz getting in behind enemy lines now, taking advantage once again of the gap that Sauron has made. The ultimate shock troop, really, is Sauron. In come the Mariners though. I mean, they could get into Sauron here. There's also some Aran Kialim. Huge amount of hit points that Sauron has as well. Obviously a unit like this is going to take some fine tuning, I think, but no doubt that it's impressive to see him in action. Scarahai are on their last legs, and most of them have long since been defeated. Still quite a lot of elite infantry. I mean, to be fair, like, Tol In Gaurhoth do need to keep the pressure up. There's some Blood Drinkers back there, some Howlers. They do still have some reinforcements. I mean, Sauron is moving in. You have to say, if Sauron was actually to perish at this moment, that could change the complexion of the battle, to be honest with you. I mean, yes, there's still the Ash Priests, which are a problem, as he charges in here to the Aran Kialim. Like I said, they're not really well suited for facing Sauron. The problem is, like, when he moves around like this, it's so difficult to land hits on him consistently, and because he's got so many hit points, if you can keep doing that, if you can keep microing him in a situation like this, it can be very, very difficult, really. If he doesn't have as much support, it can be a little bit more difficult to use him, but given the whole Tol In Gaurhoth army was at his back, it's been tough for the Falathrim, there can be no doubt about that. I think their AP has helped them in this battle, though. The Seafarers have done their thing against the Gijak Scaraz, and just the quality overall, you can see that if not for the supporting tools of the Javelins, the Ash Priest, and of course the devastation that Sauron has wrought, in terms of sheer quality, Tol In Gaurhoth have been forced back down the hill. The Nobles of Balar, the Aran Lim, the Mariners, the Eglarest units, even the Brithombar units, to be honest with you, it's not really Tol In Gaurhoth's most prized trait. Has one of the Saurons fallen? He has. Interesting. Again, like I said, if they can kill Sauron, you can see one of his corpses on the floor there. That is a sign that his hit points have finally reached their critical point. And the Aran Lim, they don't have bonuses against him, but they're still a good unit. With this many of them beating on you from every angle with their swords, it's going to have an impact eventually. Micro-intensive unit is Sauron. We've seen him used very well here, to be honest with you, by Tundra's Fox, and the use of Sauron so far may actually have already put this battle beyond the Falathrim. As you can see, the front line is starting to look a little ropey. Warriors of Eglarest are starting to retreat. I just don't think they have the manpower left to them. It's close, though. It is close, but even if they kill Sauron at this point, I think the fact that there's still Ash Priests around, and given the fact that it's really only the heavily armoured Falathrim that are going to be sticking around to fight this one out to the bitter end, Sauron is retreating back beyond the line. More throwing axes coming in from more Scarahai Longfangs. You can see over here there is a potential gap that actually there was some Vorbak Gajutar as well, which is the legendary company for Tol In Gaurhoth. They've got a sort of manky or brown hood, I should say. They're sort of what you would imagine to be the pinnacle of what being a Warg Raider is. They're very fast, they've got a brutal charge bonus. All around, the Thrangshik Wolfborn is still the stronger of the two, of course, but the Vorbak are a very good, dedicated, charging Warg. Whereas obviously the Gijak Scaraz are a little bit more heavy duty, and they are coming in here to try and overload the flank. Easier said than done. The Aran Lim are still here. Could we see a timeout? I have a feeling, to be honest with you, that if the Vorbak get in behind, I think the way that this battle is going to end is with Sauron and the Vorbak hammering into the anvil that is their main line of infantry, and I think that would probably be enough to break even the higher tier Falathrim units, to be honest with you, and that might be that. Unless the goal is simply to take the tower and then the Falathrim admit defeat, but I don't believe that's the case. It doesn't need to be the case. The other Gijak Scaraz are moving forward. On the front line, you can see that, still, Tol In Gaurhoth are struggling. In spite of their superior numbers, you can see how good the Falathrim are at holding the line in this situation, especially against more lightly armoured factions. The kings of that are still going to be Fenarfin, of course, but I would say that other than Fenarfin, the Falathrim are probably the best at doing that, really. Even Feanor, while they've got better armour, have got more of a focus around being the aggressors, stuff like the defenders of Aglon, and of course their cavalry getting in behind. They're not really designed to hold the line for as long, because generally speaking they don't really need to, because their cavalry can sort business out before that. A charge coming in from the back there. Obviously they are more than melee focused war, so it's not huge damage, but you can see the morale is starting to tank. There goes one of the Tol In Gaurhoth generals. Obviously they are one faction that can be more vulnerable to that sort of thing. The Aran Lim are unfortunately engaged by Ash Priests, which is probably the worst unit on the field they could be fighting, perhaps even more so than Sauron. And there you can see it, bisected by one of the foul Ash Priests. I like the lore that the Silmarillion team have got behind the Ash Priests, the point where I think they burn people alive and then sort of rub the ashes on their face, which is why they've got sort of that sort of grey stain, which is pretty grisly, but I mean it's the sort of thing that adds a bit of flavour to... Obviously there are several gaps in what Tolkien discusses, but yeah, that's it. The Falathrim have collapsed, unfortunately for them. And Tol In Gaurhoth victorious. Sauron, leading the army himself, manages to capture this elven haven, and Círdan's people suffer a defeat, which they did, of course, in their first engagement within the Silmarillion, I believe. So yeah, very, very good battle, though, actually. I quite liked the map. Obviously, it was one of those scenarios where it was one big grind. And to be fair, if it came down to pure melee, you would back the Falathrim every time against Tol In Gaurhoth. But I do think that the Orc players today really played their cards well. I think they used their supporting units more wisely than the Falathrim did, which is key, because obviously the Falathrim are going to get more kills than you because of their position. But if you can use yours more cost effectively, you're going to have a good time, I think. And also, use of units like Sauron, obviously at the end, the killer blow was all of the warg units getting around the flank. That really just put it beyond all doubt. The Ash Priests used their ammunition well. All of that sort of thing, all added up to being very good. And obviously the Mangonel as well, in the mid-game was very, very decisive as well. Early on, the Falathrim did okay. Tol In Gaurhoth pushed it back. Then the Falathrim pushed forward once again. They were pushing them down the hill pretty consistently, to be fair, the Falathrim. They just weren't able to kill them all quickly enough before the supporting tools for Tol In Gaurhoth were able to do their thing. Let's see what did the damage for the Falathrim. Rangers of Brythonbar doing decently. Again, a lighter archer unit. They're not rangers, remember, so getting nearly 200 kills and beyond 250 is a very good return on them, I think. The Marines of Eglarest also doing very nicely with their javelins, and of course in melee against stuff like the Scarahai, they're going to be significantly stronger, so not too surprising to see them do their thing here. The Mariners of Arendelle actually getting lower kills, but they were committed later to the front line when more of the heavy duty stuff like the Gijak Scaraz was fighting there. And also, I think they were trying to get them into Sauron, but that never really materialised. So they got fewer kills, but I would say that it was on higher tier units. The Foresters didn't have a good time because they were focused down by all sorts of missiles and projectiles, and they're very vulnerable to that sort of thing. They're more of an ambush unit on an open field, more so than for holding the line in a grind like this, and it shows, I think, in their performance. The Nobles of Balar holding things down very nicely on the front line with the Orion Ephedune, all of them getting above 250 kills. But the MVPs for Eclipse's army, certainly with the Marksmen of Balar getting beyond 400, obviously nice missile damage on them, also good in melee, chipping in there. The Catapult did okay, it managed to kill off a Mangonel, getting a few kills here and there as well, but I would have said that using up the entirety of that Catapult ammunition on the Mangonel in the end probably would have been more worth his while, but it still didn't do badly. And then Yoda over here, the Iran Kirlim, I think by the time they were committed, to be fair, in many cases the battle had already gotten beyond the Falathrim, to be honest. And while they are a fantastic line infantry unit, what Tol In Gaurhoth had left was good for dealing with them. Sauron, again, just causing havoc as he did. Ash Priests, who in melee are pretty much the Iran Kirlim's worst nightmare. And also the Wolf Guard, who are going to be quite cost effective as well because of their AP maces. The Orion Ephedune did quite well for him as well, though. Marksman of Balar did get quite a lot of kills as well, to be fair. I mean, a lot of those arrows found their way into the dirt early, but it seems like he did at least reposition them to do his thing. So, in the end, that wasn't the reason why the Falathrim lost. Spear Host, again, lighter spears. Foresters and Spear Host, they weren't going to get huge kills anyway, but you can see they did suffer from the heavy-duty nature of the assault. And his Nobles of Balar were focused down as well by javelins and axe throwers. And it is reflected in their kill count as well, because it's significantly lower than the count for Eclipse. This one did okay, to be fair, 346, as you would expect. I mean, they are the heart and soul of any Falathrim defence, so they're going to get a lot of kills, especially against lighter units. But yeah, I think that I don't think it was so much that the Falathrim didn't play well here. I think it was just the fact that Tol In Gaurhoth used their resources, both on just their plan for using their resources and the actual execution of them well. And in the end, that is what gave them their victory today. And it's nice to see Sauron in action, of course, as well, because the last battle replay I showed in Silmarillion was a desync. He was technically a part of it, but in the version we played, he died when he went into the river because of the glitch. But that isn't the case here. Very, very nice to see him doing his thing. Nice to see some new units for the Falathrim as well. Yeah, and it's nice to see a nice scenario in Silmarillion also. It's always good to get a bit of variety on the go, I find. So yeah, big thank you to Eclipse for sending this one in and making this scenario, of course. Big thank you to all of the players for being a part of another high quality battle. Nice to see some Silmarillion in the mix. As for what's coming, I'm actually recording quite a few quite a long way ahead of time, so I've got a little bit more breathing room when university starts. So I think actually at the time of recording this one, it's probably at least a week away before it actually comes out. So I'm a little bit more hazy on what is coming up immediately. Like I said, the schedule for the time being is very likely to be 2 pre-recorded videos a week and 2 streams a week. I think for the time being that is quite a comfortable schedule to stick to, and it might be the sort of thing that I can stick to when university starts up again as well, at least for the most part. You know, it might just be the odd occasion where I have to forego one of those per week, but I shouldn't imagine that's going to be the case. So based on when I think this one's coming out, I think the next thing coming up after this will be a stream. Who knows by that point whether or not the Lothlorien campaign has been lost to the ether or not. But yeah, obviously Divide and Conquer is still very much a thing. There is a certain amount of flexibility as well, like, you know, if something new comes up, then I will sort of dive into it. But for the time being, I think I'm pretty set. To be honest with you, I think that is the I think that that's the best way to go about things, to be honest with you. And being so far out, I can't really offer... Well, being far enough out that I don't know exactly what's going to follow this means I can't really offer any specifics. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you will join me for whatever is next.